About 2 seconds for me is an hour.
Isn't sugar bad for you, Dr. Morse?
You got it in there. So let's shift from the protein thinking to the starch thinking, because there's a lot of Candida things. And you ever notice how we are as Homo sapiens? Candida causes everything. And the list is a mile long, including cancer. Fungus. Now this is just a bunch of humans with unawareness. This is what's going out there. It's like Hilda Clark. The cure for all diseases, the cure for all that was her first problem. And then her other problem is focusing on microbes. You know, there's no question, we talked yesterday about deworming people, and it's essential to do that. But let's look at starch, because that seems to be a passion of ours, right? So let's take what gland in your body deals with sugar metabolism.
Pancreas.
The adrenal glands, cortisol, right? Now, what gland deals with helping to carry glucose through a cell wall? It's one thing to have chemistry on the outside of a cell, and it's another thing to have that chemistry to get into a cell. A lot of the amino acids are not used for muscle work, they're used for carriers. That's why we wrapped amino acids around minerals that the body wouldn't absorb properly. We would wrap an amino acid around it, chelate it, and then get it into the body. Why would you try to pull in the body something the body doesn't want in the first place? And what benefit does a very elemental with a low electrical charge have in terms of health benefits? Not much. Now the plant loves those elementals, takes them right in and converts them to what? Salts. The body needs tissue salts, and we get them through our plants. That'd be cool. But you could eat the dirt if you wanted to. You wouldn't absorb a lot of it, but it would have a minor electrical charge in the bowels. Starch. We love starch. We love sugar. Well, if you go back in the older days, in some places, grains were the only economical way to feed hundreds of thousands of people. Look at Africa. I mean, I just see pictures of this and cry. I mean, our United Nations is worthless. And I can see why they wanted to get out of it for years. They're worthless. When you allow someone just to kill innocent kids and women like that in Syria, you're worthless. So they've used grains. What's healthy about grains? Nothing. There's nothing. They're polysaccharides. What's a polysaccharide? A complex sugar. A complex sugar is where fructose. How many simple sugars are there? 3 simple sugars. Galactose, milk sugar. Glucose, generally vegetable sugar. And fructose, generally fruit sugar. They're all simple sugars. They're all mono. As sweet as a fruit tastes, it's still a monosaccharide. Now, all these sugars are carbon chain constituents. That's why they're called carbohydrates, because they're carbon chain constituents. And as we talked a little earlier, that carbon is essential to us over any fat or any protein, because carbon is always the central figure mixed with oxygen that creates ATP or energy. So we have to have carbohydrates. And some people will say you can't have carbohydrates. They get confused that a carbohydrate and a starch are the same thing. They are, in the sense that they are part of the carbon chain, but a fruit and a vegetable and milk are monosaccharides. When you get into your di and your poly, meaning 2 or more, you're into your starches, your grains. And sucrose, refined sugars and stuff, you start getting into your polysaccharides. Very, very sweet. A lot of sugar. For an example, I don't know what the percentages are, but I can just throw out there that a piece of bread is at least 50 to 100 times sweeter than a grape. Doesn't taste it, but there's at least triple the amount of sugar in a piece of bread. Now, let's go back to what's been happening to humans on high-protein diets. They have lost their GI tract, and what else do we know? The kidneys. high proteins have been damaging the eliminative organs for generations. We've had study after study that has said that, except with the kidneys. That's because medical doctors aren't thinking about the kidneys. They're not hanging there for no reason. Clean the blood. Clean the blood? I suppose the splene's just sitting there looking ugly. So it's real interesting that the lymphatic system has been left, of course, out of all of this. But you know with the decay of the kidneys comes the decay of the adrenal glands. So what do we have now more than anything? Low or hypo or hyperglycemia. That's type 2. Simply put, this is a sugar metabolism problem. And this is very important for you to get because you're going to have a ton of type 2s and 1s. And if you have low blood pressure, the likelihood that you have low blood sugar is there with it. So it's real important to understand that the adrenal glands are major players in this sugar metabolism. What else does the adrenal glands do? They produce neurotransmitters. And just for the sake of information, the inner part of a gland is called the medulla, and the outer part of a gland is called the cortex. In the adrenal glands, the medulla produces the body's neurotransmitters for what nervous system? The autonomic. Remember, there's two nervous systems, central and autonomic. The autonomic has two sides to it, sympathetic, parasympathetic. Parasympathetic hooked to the cerebellum and sympathetic right into the adrenals. Comes together in nerve ganglia, particularly in the solar plexus. That's why I said, if you have stomach problems, you're going to have neurological problems. Because your stomach is tied to the seat of the autonomic nerve ganglia. So the adrenal glands, when they're down, your neurotransmitters are down, your nervous system's down, and generally your cortisols are down, your estrogens are down, your testosterones are down. You have mineral steroids, about 25 mineral steroids. So your iron is down, your zinc is down, your selenium's down. We can just go to the health food store and buy them. But that wouldn't fix the problem, would it? Because the problem is a lack of proper steroid production. So when you have someone with sugar metabolism problems, they're going to have problems even with fruits and vegetables. They're going to have problems with monosaccharides too, because of the sugar metabolism problem. So what happens is that when you eat starch, which is complex sugar, and you've got adrenal gland weakness, what's going to happen to excess sugar that can't be metabolized? Fermentation. How do you break down sugar? Remember, in creation here, this is already built. All the atoms that will ever be here or ever was here is here right now. From Jesus' time to Buddha's time to Mohammed's time, doesn't matter. All the atoms are still here. Any of you could have Jesus' atoms in you, could have any of the atoms, Mohammed's atoms, it doesn't matter because atoms are simply rearranged here. We talked about that yesterday. If someone wants a baby, we have to get some atoms. So there's constant turning over of birth, life, and death. Notice that? And notice how it correlates with all the forests being broken down and what we're using the atoms for. In other words, if we're going to have prolific babies, we're going to see a lot of destruction of other things because we need atoms. And God has to figure, how are we going to supply all these atoms for all these babies coming in? How are we going to supply the atoms for what we want to do? We have to get them somewhere. So this is a birth, life, and death situation in creation. You simply come down here, you use some atoms, and you give it back when you leave. That's simple. And someone else uses the atoms, gives it back when they... Something else, whether it's a plant, whether it's an animal, whether it's a human, doesn't matter. So it's real important to understand here about the adrenal glands and starch because we are a starch-eating society. There's nothing healthy about a starch. The Dietetics Association push starches, and we have the Harvey Kellogg syndrome. Yes?
In terms of grains, and I've seen a lot of optimists like sprout their grains, like their wheat berries and their beans. Is there a distinction between that form of grain versus your typical form of flour? And is there a distinction between...
You mean grains made with berries?
Sprouts, like wheat berries. Yeah.
Oh, wheat berries and stuff. That's suppose that would be somewhat different. But anything like quinoa and millet and buckwheat and wheat and all this stuff, you know, grains.
Like oat grouse, they sprout oat grouse. Would you say there's a distinction in terms of how toxic sprouted oat grouse would be versus regular oats?
Yeah, I think even oats have, you know, like there's another health benefit, right? Oats, but again, I think you're right. It falls more into starch/protein type of thing. And oatmeal, oh my God, starch like nobody's business. So here's the problem. If you can't break down this starch, somebody has to. Because nothing is static, meaning nothing stays the same in creation. It's always in flux. Everything is always changing, constantly. You can't just have starch sit there without the microbial kingdom helping nature dissolve it. Who breaks down sugars in nature? Fungus. Not bacteria, fungus. They're always involved. Look at what we do in raising mushrooms. What we do in bread. And what's that bread? We can just carry we can carry this dough, this live dough around, you know, for generations. Oh, yeah. And then pass the live fungus around, you know, or whatever you used to call it.
Friendship.
And so, hang on, honey. And so, important to understand that when you're having sugar metabolism problems, you are going to invite the fungal community into your body to help you. In fermentation, what happens to your blood sugar levels? What happens to your blood alcohol levels? You know, it wasn't that long ago. Remember that female that had a van of maybe another female adult and some children? She went the wrong way and she crashed and killed everyone. The news is trying to portray her as a closet alcoholic, and she had a little weed in her. Now let me tell you something. Then the attorney and her husband saying she's not an alcoholic. And the attorney was saying she has a big sore here on her leg. And that was just passed off. I looked at it as a big clue. Big old sore on her leg. What made that big old sore on her leg? What system in your body? The lymph system. Who controls the lymph system? Kidney and adrenals. Okay? So let's say this lady had very weak adrenals and she was pumping the starch. Or she was doing a starch-protein combination. Now, we haven't talked about proper food combinations. So, what happens when you combine your foods wrong, or you have too concentrated of a food and you can't digest it properly? What if she had a pancreatic weakness and couldn't break down her foods properly? What would happen to starch? Fermentation. And when you get fermentation, you get alcohol. How do we make wine and beer, right? Yeast. Yeah, yeast. Brewer's yeast. I used to sell brewer's yeast all the time. Didn't know. B vitamins, right? The nutritional yeast and then all this stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Schultz still uses the yeast in his superfood blend. Nobody must have tested on that one. I've never tested. Oh, sorry. I'll sit. So, you have to understand that we are full of fungus because of what? Our inability to metabolize sugars and our desire to suck down on complex sugars. So all the candies, all this stuff full of sugars. And we can't metabolize these sugars. You can't be mad because nature sent in the fungus or Candida problems. You can't be mad at that because that's nature. And it's the same thing with proteins. You don't break proteins, you get the bigger boys. You get the proteolytics, but these are the bacteria. So if you don't break down something, nature's going to send in the troops to help you. That's just, you know, I was watching this, I was waiting in some waiting room for something, and they had a hunter show on. And they had this guy aimed on this big buck, and he was a pretty well-endowed buck. And he shot him. By the time that he walked over to that buck, and the cameraman walked with him over to that buck, someone already beat him there. In that quick time. Who do you think that was?
Flies.
Mr. Fly. fly had beat the hunter to the kill. Death! Go clean up the mess. See what I'm saying? We have to clean up the mess. Nature is self-cleansing. You know, trouble with medical thinking is they look at nature as the problem. Nature is the gift. Nature is our beneficiary. Nature is what makes us, we need to hug the mother, not kick her. You know, if you ever get that book, To Touch the Earth, it was written a long time ago, and it was little clumps of sayings from Native American chiefs, because a lot of the chiefs were mystics. And this one chief said, "You ask my men to work, but men who work cannot dream, and wisdom comes in dreams." And this other Indian chief said, "You want me to plow and rip my mother's skin and put stuff in her body?" It's pretty cool to read some of those old mystic Indian sayings about the earth and the mother and things like that. I ran a radio show here in Sarasota for at least a year, and I ran it with a Native American. And we were always talking to the Hopis and Sioux. We were talking to everybody around the country. And my part has always been, love the mother, but understand you're not from here. Start preparing yourself for a greater journey and enjoy the ride. So, you have to understand all this Candida problems is a byproduct of our starch eating. Now, what else do we notice that's a big problem? And we'll get to this particularly Thursday. What else is a spawner of Candida? And I talk a lot about it on YouTube. Sulfur. The overuse of antibiotics, particularly the sulfa drugs, have left a lot of people with sulfur-ridden bodies. Remember the orange in the eye? Anytime you see sulfur in your eye, you can expect an overload of Candida problems. I don't know what it is, it's just like an aphrodisiac to the fungal community. Now you can use parasidium and you can use different antifungals, but I find if you have fungal on the toes and nails and stuff like this, the most effective way is to clean what system too. Clean your lymph, fix your adrenals so your metabolism sugars are normal and everything's good. And that fungus will come right out of there. Remember the commercial for Lamisil? You have this little fungi guy and he opens up the toe and jumps in and starts playing in the goop with all his buddies? What kind of goop was he playing in? Sewage. Sewage. Lymph. You know? I thought it was an interesting commercial. What would he be playing with in there? Sewage. I mean, when you know the body is a bunch of cells and how many fluids? 2. Blood and lymph. Absolutely. So he's not playing in the blood, he's playing in the sewage. That make sense? Yes.
Earlier you said people who have this problem can't digest fruits, vegetables, they can't digest things. What do they eat?
She brings up a good point. I want to keep going with this sugar thing, especially since you're filming this, but there's no question. Now, we're talking about sugar metabolism. What about the carrier, insulin? See, I consider glucose an inferior sugar than fructose. When you have a sugar, a carbon that needs a carrier, to me it's an inferior product. To me, and in the books, fructose goes to the liver and is converted back to glucose. Why would you have to do that? It's already a simple sugar. How are you going to make it more simple? Not in my book. In a lot of the physiology books, you'll find fructose is absorbed by what? Diffusion. Sucked in. And that is more viable. I can put a type 1 diabetic all on fruit. And after they get through glucose loading, breaking down fat and everything else, they'll stay, their blood sugars can steady. Now we have one or two that are real brittle, okay. But most of them, they steady right up. Give them a vegetable and whoosh! Now remember on the YouTube, we talk about neurological type 1s. Right. And I have this in my book over here. This is from a Canadian university that found that a lot of type 1 diabetics are neurological type 1s. What system do you think, what neurological system do you think would control the movement of insulin and the production of insulin? It would have to be one system. parasympathetic, sympathetic had to be the which? Autonomic. What gland controls the autonomic? We're back to the friggin' adrenal glands again. We sure are. Now, you can have beta cell problems. Remember I told the story about the lady that went into surgery and she hurt her knee. She went into surgery on the knee. Surgeon screwed up or something, and so she was in there 4 times. 4 surgeries on this knee later. She became a type 1 and she quit menstruating. If I had not read this research, I wouldn't have had a freaking clue myself. And I pride myself on, taking everything to the wall. And so I went after her nervous system, and what caused her nervous system to go down? Anesthesia. Neurotoxic. Think of Michael Jackson. It's a neurotoxin. It lowers your blood pressure until you die. In other words, it lowers your adrenal function. Neurotoxin. And so you've got to consider, so you're always going to work on the adrenal glands of a human no matter what. I can just tell you that. You're always going to work on the kidneys no matter what. What else you want to work on no matter what? Lymph no matter what, because they control that, and you're going to work on the gut no matter what. But if you just said, I want to work on the lymph system, you can effectively clean the brain down. Because it is the lymph system that actually is the problem in the liver, the problem in the lungs, the problem in the brain, no matter what the condition is they put on it. Whatever condition. Anything with pain, anything with swelling. Now, you on top of a genetically weak body. So you see where we're at as humans. We got some work to regenerate. But it's simplistic. But it does require a lot of self-discipline. No question about it. So don't get caught up in the Candida. What you see out there is Candida causes everything. This thing causes everything. And everybody people are so confused about health, they're willing to blame any and everything for any and everything. Now, what have we not covered here? Food combinations. Are we good with the sugar thing? Or do you want to go more into that?
I think the more Dr. Morse we hear, the better.
Oh, I think you have to understand, too, in a type 1, you're going to definitely work on your pancreas. Now, when you say you're going to work on your pancreas, what does that mean? Because if I eat just a raw food diet, basically that's just going to go in the body. Did you know, though, that when you look at the Creator, you start looking at things, you realize that every plant has a reason for being here. Mm-hmm. And every fruit has its own individuality, along with every vegetable. And they're like herbs. And what's beautiful about an herb is they can do, this is what confuses the intellectual mind, is that herbs can do 10 different things, just one herb. They're adaptogens, most of them. And they can do 10 different things. I remember Dr. Christopher was telling a story, and somebody got hurt at one of his seminars, and Christopher said, anybody got any hemeostatics, which is blood, stop bleeding? And no one had anything, and someone said, well, I have a little lobelia here. He said, well, that's not a hemeostatic, but try it. Stop the bleeding just like that. So then they realized lobelia had a hemostatic property. It's like, dang, it's an antispasmodic. I used to use lobelia to make you throw up, and this is old Dr. Christopher's thing. You get someone with real heavy congestion in the lungs, and they're struggling to breathe. If you make them throw up, it'll compress the lungs, and they'll throw up a lot of mucus, and they'll breathe better. So I used to do that in these real extreme cases.
In his book, School of Natural Healing, he had a guy come to him, and he gave him peppermint tea first because he knew it was going to happen.
Yeah.
He gave him Lobita, and it relaxed his stomach muscles. And he threw up, he filled a 5-gallon pail with mucus. And the next day, he didn't have any stomach cramps because the peppermint relaxed him, and he was able to go to work. He had to sleep sitting up for 20 years, I think, because they would drown him if he laid.
Yeah, exactly.
And he just pulled it out of his lungs.
Isn't that funny? You drown on your own sputum. Well, absolutely. I tell you, the beauty about some of these old greats is they have a lot of little clues and things that they use, and that's what I liked about Christopher too, But this is the beauty of botanicals and what you can do with them. You can do so many things. I'm like a kid in a candy store when it comes to botanicals, because That's our sucre, that's our nutrition. And keep in mind that when you're fasting and you're on herbs, you're not really fasting, because every herb is packed with nutrition, and we don't cook any of them except the heal all tea. Now, what's fantastic about God is that you can even cook these friggin' herbs and they'll work for you. Now, man can't fix anything like that. Man can't make anything like that. So why not use what we have to our disposal? And we have so much to learn about it. And when we get to there, again, we're going to start this afternoon probably with this, but we changed botanical medicine, changed the thinking. Instead of using botanicals to treat diseases, which is medical thinking, we're using herbs to accelerate the cleaning of the lymph system and the rebuilding of tissue. And I think it's a more appropriate look at what the power of the plant has to do. It either has an effect upon a cell or the two fluids. Isn't that strange? So you start to realize that's what we're up against. How simple is that? Food combinations are real important. And I only recommend 2 to think about. You never combine protein and starches, right? You've got a digestive process on protein that starts where? In the stomach. Hydrochloric acid releases pepsin and starts the digestive process of breaking down this heavy, complex structure of amino acids through the polypeptide stages down into the amino acid stages. Consider a fruit like a frame house and a protein like a brick house. Remember the 3 little piggies? And the last one built a brick house, and that little old man wolf couldn't blow that house down because it was so integrated, it was so tough, he couldn't blow that house down. That's a protein. The problem with it, they're almost too complex for the Homo sapien. And you'll notice that. And how about the pain factor? And I talk a lot about this. When you're in pain, do not do protein. You want to prove this to yourself. When you're in pain, put yourself on fruits and vegetables. And let that pain subside. And then just go have you a big Whopper or some kind of protein. Nuts will do. I had a medical doctor call me one day and he said, listen, I got a hold of your book. And he said, I run a hospital in San Diego. And he said, I love what you do. He said, can I come down and sit with you? And he said, I heard you have a school. Can I come to it? I said, sure. So he came down to the school, and he was kind of walking in like this. And I said, hey, Doc, what's going on here? He said, my right kidney. So I had my camera. I looked in his eye, and I said, oh yeah, big genetic weakness. He said, I've had it off and on all my life. I said, oh yeah. So I said, you want to go raw? Go raw. So he did. He went all raw and all fruit. And we had the herbs, and I said, I want you to hit those herbs hard. And that afternoon, I said, how you doing, Doc? He said, well, the edge is off of it. Next morning, I said, Doc, how you doing? He said, well, I can't really hardly feel it. I said, it's still there. That afternoon, how you doing, Doc? He said, you know, I can't feel it anymore. 3rd day, how you doing, Doc? I can't feel it at all. This is unbelievable. 3rd afternoon, I don't even know I have a problem. 4th day, I don't even know I have a problem. 5th day, the team has a raw food kitchen set up to how your kitchen would look like as a raw foodist. And they were serving some Giuliano stuff. Giuliano, you know, hydration and stuff, hydrated food. So he has a dish called meatloaf. And it tastes like meatloaf. It got a lot of nuts and then your veggies. So I said, Doc, this is really good. You need to try this. So 1st bite, 2nd bite. Oh, what was that? I said, that's protein. And I said, I just want you to know what happens when you eat protein. Now, he'll never forget that. He'll never forget that.
How could it be so quick?
That quick vibration. Remember that at one level, things seem to be inert, solidified, inorganic, and at another level, it all has frequencies and magnetics to it. Can't exist without it. And that frequency, remember the law of homeostasis, pulls you down When you pull the nerve energy out of the body, guess what? And when you're in pain, I tell you, just a testament of the power of fruits and vegetables in your life and what they do to you in times of acids. So, you can look at it this way. Putting base chemistry on top of an acid chemistry neutralizes the acid chemistry. Putting acid on top of acid does what? Accentuates the acid, right? So why would you have chemotherapy? Why would you even do something like that? It's insane. But they do, and they get away with it. For now. For now. And it's just disheartening to see the people coming, the mothers, 30 years old, 20 years old, ravished with chemo, putting them way out there for us to try to get them back. And they got little babies. See, I have another philosophy. They should march them to jail and let them rethink their thinking process. Because you never treat an acid condition with more acids. It only exacerbates the problem. You must learn proper chemistry. To neutralize an acid, you've got to go to the other side. You got a man, the best way to neutralize him is a female. You do not mix two testosterones together. Of course, I've seen what it is when we get a bar full of estrogens. Woo-hoo! Woo! Crazy! Well, they do. Sorry, man, I get up and down. So this is what we're up against, you know, and you just keep this whole thing simple. And just let all of this stuff kind of come and make us form as it does with you. Especially those that are not used to the body or how the body's put together. And just think it's just a simple machine, a very intelligent machine, that is made of cells that are conscious. And these little people are aware, by the way, they have memory. Matter of fact, can you be on this planet, with what we've talked about this weekend, can you be on this planet and not have memory? Let's go back to this chart. Everything that's created at this level has to go down through those worlds. Everything. You can't be here without first being here. Or there. Depends what position you're looking at. Remember the seeker of God? Me, God. Reverse that. Reverse your perception of you as separate. Work from as opposed to. It's that simple of a shift of consciousness. Work as if instead of in the depleted way. The poor me. But everything, so everything on this planet has memory. I talked about the secret life of plants and the memory of plants. And the fact that this lady professor is using plants in airports because it can detect chemicals better than bomb-sniffing dogs. For the average person, it probably freaked them right out to understand that. But that's what we need. We got to get the human psychic up a little bit and realize that life is so much bigger than our little bitty troubles. And that we create our little bitty troubles. But we're in a planet, we're in a dream that is not totally ours. So you're kicked back and back and back. How about if I put a fruit on top of a vegetable? This is where you can get fungal problems, candida problems too. Putting fruits on top of vegetables. Putting a fast digesting food on top of a slow one. There was an elderly gentleman in my town who had a big bowl of oatmeal for breakfast. Still hungry. So he wanted some watermelon. And his wife said, I have one in the refrigerator for you, honey. And he said, good, bring it forth. Which I cut your watermelon this morning and ate half, and it was delicious, my man. So he had the watermelon. He said, honey, I'm going to Home Depot. I'll be right back. Probably about an hour. Hour went by. Her husband wasn't back yet. 2 hours went by. Husband wasn't back yet. 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours, and now she's freaking out. So the phone rings, and it's the deputy. And the deputy sheriff says, you looking for your husband? She said, yeah. He left to Home Depot this morning. He said, what's going on with that? He said, I arrested him this morning for DUI. She said, there's no way. My husband doesn't touch alcohol. The deputy said, well, he's been yelling that all morning, but his blood alcohol level is above the acceptable range. This guy took this to court and proved that certain foods digest faster than others. How about the digestive time of a vegetable over that of a fruit? Well, how can we use that in our understanding of detoxification? What is the one need that you need to help move and help heal the body? Energy. Energy is at the core of everything. Your body is constantly working with energy management. Oh, you want to walk? Okay, we're going to look at some neurotransmitters for that. We need some energy for that. Oh, you want to talk too? Oh, you want to walk and talk? Okay, we're going to have energy for that too. You know, and it goes on and on and on like that. Well, when you get highly depleted adrenal glands, you don't, you're isolated. You don't want to talk. You don't want to do anything. You're isolated. You don't have enough energy. How are you going to heal that way? So we take you off the tough digesting foods, especially those that cause problems, and we put you on the fast digesting foods. That's why juicing, of course. Therefore, you get maximum energy, you get your maximum nutrition, and at the same time, you get the power of astringents and everything else in there. So real important why we do that. We're looking for energy management. This is why rest. Rest. Let your body take the energy, connect to the God conscious state where you're pumping in the supreme energy from that, the supreme energy of yourself, the supreme energy of fruits and of the herbs, and you've got the best healing power you can possibly have. And some people need it because they're that far away from slipping out of their physical body, or that close. So you never mix a fruit on top of something that's digesting slow, because fruits like to go right on through. That's why I love them. And you get fermentation. Well, what does fermentation require? Fungus, Candida, yeast. And just remember that. Let's don't blame nature. Let's blame what we've been eating and what's happened to our internal condition. The condition of our adrenals, the condition of our thyroids, the condition of our parathyroids, the condition of our pituitaries. It's a mess. And we made it a mess by what we eat, by what we drink, by what we breathe, and by what we put on our skin. It's simple. That's how we bring the outside world of chemistry in. Well, chemistry's chemistry. You know, you got two sides to it. So you actually have a battle between the two. So you can equate base or alkaline chemistry to the female side, and you can equate acids to the men's side. If you want to know a male, think acid. Most of the males in this room are predominantly feminine. They have a 50-50 balance, or maybe a little more. I have my female side, and I have my male side. But I'm neither one, am I? As a soul or as an individual expression of God, I'm not gendered. If I'm part of the allness, I'm not gendered. God isn't gendered.
That's right.
You can't be gendered. That's creation. That's duality. And you're gendered, you have one side or the other. You can play on either side. It's a playground. I tap my female side, I have love and compassion. I tap my male side, I'm aggressive. Corrosive. So you ladies want a good man, find one with a little feminine. You get a male, hard to take. Honey, give me a kiss. I gotta go, give me Okay, did I miss your question? I want to get yours too.
I was back in sugar. I didn't really understand. You said that glucose is an inferior sugar than fructose.
I think it is, because if you need a carrier to help carry you through a cell wall, and yet you have another sugar here that'll suck in by diffusion without the help of a carrier, which one are you going to have a better luck with? And I think diffusion is more apt to it. And so if you're having trouble with beta cell production of insulin, whether it's a neurological or a beta cell problem in and of itself, You're still going to get ATP because you're using a sugar that doesn't need insulin. See what I'm saying? The whole problem here is getting ATP to the cell. If you don't get energy in the cell, if you don't get your gasoline, your carbon, and your oxygen into a cell, what's going to happen to the cell? Death. Cannot do that.
Fructose doesn't need to be converted to glucose to get the.
Well, you got it. Yeah, I mean, my theory is fructose is not converted to glucose at all. I disagree with that. Totally. If it was, we wouldn't be able to treat diabetes. What I just said. Right? You wouldn't be able to use it in type 1 diabetes because your blood sugars would be all over the place. Because in type 1, glucose can make your blood sugar go up. You certainly wouldn't want to do starch. Wait a minute, I'll be ready.
Type 2 diabetes and sugar.
That's type 2, that's sugar metabolism. That's the adrenal glands. That's the easiest blood sugar to fix because you've got to fix what? To fix that blood sugar.
You know, so many people are saying no fruit. If you got diabetes, stay away from fruit.
Well, we touched on that, right? Simple sugar. You've got to have sugar, period. If you try to avoid sugar, go to how many people died on the Atkins diet. You cannot. His philosophy is simplistic. You're overweight, starve your body for sugar, and what does grizzly bears do to get ATP while they're hibernating? They break down that stored glycogen or fat to glucose, and then you got ATP as long as you get it into a cell. Right? Essential. So, people are crying all this sugar thing. Carbon, essential. Gasoline. You got to always stop at a gas station, so we have to have it. The problem is with ourselves and what we've done to our bodies with the high-protein diets. It's the one thing that's destroyed us are these high-protein diets. And yet, the medical doctors keep pushing them. All you have to simply do is spend 2 months on nothing but protein and then 2 months on simply nothing but fruits and vegetables and see the difference yourself. Test it on yourself. Yes, sir.
If your adrenals are down and you've got problems with carbohydrates and you're just eating fruits, and you still having problems losing weight, what's the problem?
She says, and you're the one, And when you look at someone like her, because remember, when you come to this class, you're all up for grabs for me, okay?
What was the question?
Oh, yeah.
She was talking about, say that, can you say that?
Your adrenals are down.
When your adrenals are down,
Yeah, and your kidneys, well, no problem coming from the adrenals are down. And like you're saying, you're drinking carbohydrates and just strictly fruits. And you're still having problems losing weight.
Wow.
What is causing it?
It's a good question. When you have the adrenals down and you're still on fruit, all I can say is that your body has a far better chance, and especially with the fruit, you have diffusion too. So you just have to work through that and get your adrenals healthy, and then your sugars will balance out real nice and easy and everything else, because low blood sugar is as bad as high blood sugar. And we got a lot of low blood sugar. But anytime you see someone fighting weight, the society has pushed the thyroid. Most weight is adrenals. So is chronic fatigue.
So, in that case, would you use a glandular?
I would. But, when you're taking chronic days today, I'm using a glandular almost always for the adrenals. That's because herbal glandulars, if you will, herbal formulas are generally berries. If you look at all the berries, that's what we use. Hawthorn berry, chase tree berry, saw palmetto berry. We use the berries for the glands because berries are considered glandular herbs. And so, when you eat blueberries and blackberries, they used to say the fruit looks just like the part of the body that it affects. But anyway, it'd be important to eat a high berry. But if you're real chronic, I don't know how long that would take.
So you're saying you're taking an adrenal?
I would take an adrenal glandular, definitely, and help bring that up. At the same time, what does it sit on? The kidneys, so I would take an herbal formula for the kidneys. Now, what does those two things control? The gigantic lymph system. So I would work on that as well. Because anybody that has sugar metabolism problems probably just doesn't have sugar metabolism problems, right? Because the same gland does a million other things. And the medical doctors divide them all up in separate different problems. The problem is, one gland can have maybe 50 to 100 disease, well, that's their thinking, diseases that's tied to. And the problem is the same gland, like iron and anemia. Get your adrenals up. B12, get your adrenals up. I know there's someone else I want to give it.
Dr. Morse, doesn't chronic stress, the sympathetic overdrive states, play a huge role in sugar?
Well, sure. Well, let's look at this for a minute. The adrenal glands produces in the medulla your neurotransmitters. And they run, obviously, the autonomic. So you have what's known as epinephrine, which is adrenaline. We use the word epi in the ER because you're going to get a needle of it if you're not careful. How you come in. So epinephrine and norepinephrine. Now that's your adrenalines, and that actually dilates the blood vessels, it constricts the breathing. I mean, it really puts the energy to the muscles. So you can fight or run. Fight or flight, remember? But when you do that, the dopamines and acetylcholines are cut down, so your elimination. In other words, energy management. I'm going to shut this system down so I can use that energy to focus on muscles and hauling butt. After I haul butt and I've created all this acids, I've got to shift because now I've got to get rid of what that I created in a highly adrenaline rush. Acids. Lactic acid, all kinds of acids. So now I have to shift my energy management to my adrenal glands to turn on the kidneys so I can eliminate. This isn't digestive waste. This is cellular waste. So my adrenals have to shift to dopamine and acetylcholine, and now I can poop and pee. Well, when we're under stress, which neurotransmitters are being used? Epinephrine and norepinephrine. And guess what's shut off? And then stress, you honk down on what? Your kidneys. Well, you're honking down on your sewer system. See what I mean? Are we at that time? Huh? We're only in a day and a half, for God's sake. But this afternoon we'll tear into the herbs, and it'll start being more evident as we move through that into protocols. And then things will start soaking in more and more and more as we go through here. When we hit to the iris, then I'll even reiterate, and we'll get more into the glands, we'll get more into that.